So welcome today to the session, Perspectives of Democracy and Global Citizenship. And today we have I believe we have two presenters, and I believe that they're here. Dalen Swanson and Heidi Bizeth. And I believe Laurence Guérin is not here today. She is here?
Yes, it's okay. The other way around. I'm here.
Okay, so Delaney's here. I see Delaney, I see Laurence.
Heidi will not be joining us.
Okay, so it's Heidi's not joining us. Okay, excuse me. Okay, well, thank you so much for all of you attending. And I think we can start with Delaney, who is professor at the University of Stirling in the UK. And we will give you, I think we decided on 10 minutes. So, I mean, actually can have more, because since you're only two, so I think we can agree on 15 minutes each. And I still think we'll have ample time for discussions. So, Delaney, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Charmain. It's Dalen Swanson, but that's okay. Don't worry.
Dalen, excuse me.
That's fine. Not to worry. I've been called all sorts of things, so really not to worry. I'm just going to try and upload my PowerPoint. So just give me a moment to do that. If it appears here. Oh. Ah. Okay, well, it's 7 o'clock here in Scotland, so it's lovely to meet everybody, and I'm looking forward to our discussions after the presentations today. So I'm going to be talking about a critical ethic of justice-informed global citizenship education in times of post-truth and democracy under threat. And I'm going to begin by talking about contradiction, in homage to contradiction. So as we know, the term global citizenship is a very contested term, and it has an inherent contradiction to it. And I'm going to read a short piece from an article that I wrote with a colleague of mine, Mustafa Gamal, just to engage with that idea of contradiction in global citizenship. So, global citizenship entered public parlance more prominently under heightened globalization and the new public management systems, intensified multilateral free trade agreements, increased government austerity policies, and the economization of all relations under the spread and seepage of global capital. As a new mode of governmentality, neoliberal globalization underwrote the conservative political doctrines of the then UK Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and the US President Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. In the 1990s, it came to be aligned, at least from the West, of triumphant capitalism, exemplified by the fall of the Berlin Wall, the disintegration of the Soviet bloc, and the fall of apartheid and emergence of a new South Africa made in the image of Western capitalist democracies. To be a citizen of this new globalized and interconnected world was to be a subject of capital. With a shift of an enlightened rights of man to a civil libertarian rights of the citizen, and we've discussed this in another paper, Gamal and Swanson 2018. As an extension of the nation state and its economic interests, the emphasis on the citizen and hence the role, rights, and duties of citizenship produced a dialectical tension in this new globalizing outlook. While borders were to be traversed in the name of capital, the state and patriotic allegiances to it centralized globalized competition, supporting the capitalist system at scale. This trend advanced capitalization of securitization as a heightened state of bordering, supporting a deepening crimmigration system as internal and external migration increased and the migrant became uncitizenized. Under everyday bordering, the free flow of goods, services, and capital had its limits when it came to citizens. Not everyone could be a global citizen. In this neoliberal world, being a subject of capital and a subject of the nation state became necessary allies, albeit uncomfortable ones at times. Like Janus, the ancient Roman god of dualities, a subject of this world order was to be both an inwardly gazing subject of the state and simultaneously an outwardly gazing subject of global capital, constantly on the prowl for new markets, new people, new places, and new opportunities to exploit. The term global citizen carries the inherent contradiction of Janus, being a juridical contradiction. It looks both inwards and outwards and carries borders and bordering as Derridian spectres. Global implies spillage out into the world beyond state borders, while citizenship implies being subject to the state. Here, rights and duties of citizenship exact patronage to the state, with implications for how we might think of global citizenship education enshrined in the UN Sustainable Development Goals, Target 4.7. The latent juridical contradiction in GC points to at least two differing interpretations and experiences of the term. It could either serve as a Euro-modernist flaw at the root of its conception, or the site of a productive tension with which one could more usefully engage, especially in its realizations as critical GCE. Viewing the contradiction at the heart of GC as a productive tension by way of entry into GCE may offer the necessary vector into prizing open new pathways to seeking alternative futures, while simultaneously not sidestepping the unavoidably difficult task of doing so. Neoliberalism casts a gaze over the world and renders it comprehensible to its own common sense making, repulsing other versions of reality. The gaze seeks to make the worldly systemic operations a unified frame under global capitalism. As neoliberalism casts its universalizing gaze across the world, so the spaces of difficulty, ambiguity, and the seemingly contradictory as interpretations of GC and carried into GCE become sites of possibility for critical resistance and resilience against Euromodernism, capitalist exploitation, and its colonial legacies. The implications for education and by extension are socio-political futures of the critical embrace of contradiction and ambiguity at the heart of GC, rather than as an opportunity for its categorical dismissal, is something which needs considered attention. Moves to subsume GC within sustainable development education or learning for sustainability, as in the Scottish national curriculum known as Curriculum for Excellence, may appear to sidestep the discomforts of engaging critically with the conundrums created through our infatuation with capitalism, but it does not diminish the urgent need to do so. It may be an unpalatable and inconvenient truth to foster in youth a worldly, critically conscious disposition, especially if it encourages an unruliness toward authority and the establishment in resistance to the status quo. Often it is perceived as a dangerous move for civil society bureaucrats to write into national schooling curricula principles of education that would encourage a critical stance by youth where justified towards their national governments and the inept policies they may enact. But it is an act of radical hope that alternative futures may be sought. These are futures beyond our current apocalyptic one, marked by enlarging intersectional spheres of crisis. Such discomforting moves require conviction, imagination, and courage, but also political will on the part of those that hold sway over education systems and public policies. So that comes from a recent chapter, and it's the introduction to global citizenship, education and learning for sustainability, tension, flaws and contradictions as critical moments of possibility and radical hope in educating for alternative futures. But now I want to extend some of that thinking to focus on the notion of being informed, which, as we can understand, is a very contested term. And yet I believe it's more important than ever in terms of critical global citizenship, democracy, and transformative education. So critical global citizenship education has been touted as important undergirding to school and higher education curricula in times of post-truth, democracy under threat, and a planet in crisis. When I think of democracy under threat, I'm hearing the words and wisdom of some of our distinguished speakers at the symposium, such as Professor Paul Carr, referring to the rise of authoritarian democracy, a very important conceptualization of a dominant current trend shaping the politics of democracy and its future. So in thinking about democracy, I'm thinking of liberatory democracy, one that works towards structural freedoms, ones imagined in collective actions of the anti-apartheid movement, and today the decolonial movement, Black Lives Matter, and others. This version of GC, in its alignment with liberatory democracy, is rightfully seen as an answer to the destructive consequences of a dominating world system that has reduced every element of that system to a transactional economic relationship. I listened to a live presentation this morning at the Climate Expo on nature-based solutions to the climate and ecological crisis, hosted by the University of Cambridge. So just to let you know, Climate Expo is a climate conference ahead of the COP26 conference to be held in Glasgow later this year. And I myself have been working for our GCRF Water and Fire project, of which I am the principal investigator, to have some presence at COP, so that the experiences of disenfranchised people in the global south experience climate-related socio-ecological disasters related to drought, flooding, and fires might be heard and their stories powerfully articulated. But back to Climate Expo, the keynote speaker kept on referring to the need to attribute a cost to nature in order to mitigate the current destructive ecological trends and to prevent global warming from exceeding 1.5 degrees Celsius target in the next decade. While the so-called pro-Earth arguments were powerfully articulated, they were nevertheless framed in capitalist terms, and the capitalization of nature was taken for granted. With these contradictions and dilemmas we face in undertaking transformative education toward critical global citizenship education, how do we conceptualize fostering a justice-informed approach to the crises we face? A justice-informed approach that grapples with contradiction and ambiguity. So the question we may ask is, what might be missing currently from the methods and approaches offered in meeting the justice and libertarian objectives of critical GCE? Is the necessary prerequisite of needing to be informed, most especially in times of increasing fascism, so-called fake news, entrenched political tribalisms, and populist nationalisms? For youth to seek and enact alternatives to the current eco-political intractabilities we are in and make possible more hopeful futures, there will need to be greater emphasis and developed understanding about what it means to be and how to be justice-informed, or so I believe. While being informed is necessarily contested, and the question as to who decides for whom and who gets to adjudicate this should always be present, I assert here as a way of moving the debate forward 3 categories of knowledge and ontology that I think important in underpinning this objective. The first being educational knowledge that fosters curiosity and the desire for justice. Political literacy as enabling the ability to engage in justice-informed debates and actions. And then the third category, which is knowledge as ontology, which I believe is important as a disposition toward the world and to justice-oriented actions and ends. And I'm going to move to just describe a reason for why I think justice-informed approaches are in critical. Just one example of that. Recently, I heard a student of mathematics trying to bring mathematics together with global citizenship, and the focus of attention was on poverty. And this young man spoke about the use of mathematics to address poverty issues, and how to develop a project or a lesson plan in schools around mathematics and poverty. And he went on to describe how people that are poor could do a better budget and formulate a budget that would address their poverty, will not address their poverty, but that they would keep within their budgets while being poor. For me was actually quite disturbing, because there seemed to be little understanding or political literacy on the part of this young man in terms of thinking about how the poor are already being oppressed by conservative politics and are being asked to absorb and be resilient to poverty, and that the fault of poverty is their own, and that in fact they should just be keeping within limited budgets. And so that really got me thinking about what it means to mathematize. I am a critical mathematics educator as well. What it means to mathematize political issues and bring global citizenship to mathematics education, or mathematics to critical global citizenship. And that there needs to be a political literacy. It's not just only about mathematics, and that mathematics cannot in and of itself address these issues. What does it mean to mathematize a problem, and how does it change it? What does it become in the process of mathematizing it? And what kinds of political literacies need to attend those actions? So that really got me thinking about what it means to be justice informed. I teach a course, I actually give a 2-hour-long lecture on global citizenship at a Scottish university here. And it's the introductory lecture to the module. Here in Scotland, global citizenship is viewed as the right of every child, and learning for sustainability. So it's a key element of schooling in the Scottish context. And what I did was open up with trying to provoke some understandings of what I do, to provoke some understandings of what global citizenship actually is. And I use visual analyses to try and draw attention to various issues around global citizenship. Because as we know, there's a very superficial understanding of global citizenship, as there is of democracy, and a range of different perspectives, increasingly from very liberal, neoliberal, on to critical. So these are some of the things, and I'm just going to take you quickly through some of them, and then some guiding principles that I tried to develop, which are not actual prescriptions about how to do global citizenship education or develop projects on global citizenship education in schools, ones that are transdisciplinary, but really just to provoke questions that will help young teachers or teachers going into schools to think about these.
Can you start to conclude, because
yes,
we're already at 2:20.
Okay, sure. So this is just, and I'm just going to flip through these. These are just some images to try and provoke some understandings of what global citizenship actually is for becoming teachers. And then the categories for them to think through are about reflexivity, thinking globally and acting locally, and some other guiding principles which I could share with the audience, and again that there are questions, not prescriptions, on how to do that, but they help orientate young people, I think, towards a more justice-informed approach to critical global citizenship. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Swanson. next we have Laurence Guérin from the Netherlands, from the Hague University of Applied Sciences. And without further ado, I will give you the microphone.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen as well. So my name is Laurence Guérin, and I'm a professor of global citizenship at the Hague University of Applied Science in the Netherlands. It's a vocational higher education. I'm also working for another institution in the east of the Netherlands. And the focus of my both research group is citizenship in the Hague global citizenship, and in the east of the Netherlands citizenship. And what we are trying to do at the Hague University, well, not trying, but I've been working there for 2.5 years. So we would like to democratize our institution, and we want to do so using a student voice. So the Hague University of Applied Science in the Netherlands, and I would like to go with you through the process and the starting research we have been doing, and the kind of program we would like to implement within our university. The Hague University of Applied Science has several ambitions, and one of they have 3 ambitions: to become an inclusive campus, to be a student-centered institution, and one that is really high is each student leaves to us as a global citizenship. And the last one has been one focus of our institution since 30 years. And when I arrived, everyone I talked to asked me, what is global citizenship? And I was very happy with Dalen, because I'm also discussing global citizenship as a contested concept, democracy as a contested concept. And I think we should help our students to figure out what kind of democracy they would like to live in, what kind of global citizen they would like to be. But when you have such ambitions, it's quite striking that we are very traditional in our way of communicating with our students, of working with our students, and a very traditional way, top-down approach. So we have a kind of paradox in our institution. So this implication of these ambitions is that in order really to take them seriously within our education programs, if we really want to realize Bildung and so general education and emancipation, besides vocational qualification and socialization, we really have to think about students' participation in higher education. And this is really essential. So how can all players contribute to university education, research, policy at the classroom, curriculum, and organization level? So what we have to do is to democratize our institution. So not only talking about what students should achieve as global citizens, but what our responsibility in thinking about how our relationship is to our students. So the challenge is to allow our young people to participate in decision making, and it raises management issues actually, as to what would be required in order for us as a higher institution to be a democratic institute in which students and staff are jointly responsible for learning and for achieving a work climate that invites individual and collective learning. And our question is, does the Hague University of Applied Science fulfill such commitment, and how students oriented we are really? And this was really the start of our research. And we did two kinds of research, one more theoretical research on student voice and students' participation, students' engagement, students' partnership. And we also make preliminary research on how our students are actually experiencing their participation. So
if we jump in just quickly,
yes?
I think we see both your notes in your presentation, but you probably want to just show your presentation. So if you if you stop
yes.
sharing, start share again, then it'll probably show the way you intended. Forgive me for the interruption.
And
yes.
this, no, it's good. Yes.
Perfect, thank
you. So what we have been looking at is that students' voice is in itself also a controversial, of a contested concept. There are different kinds of way to approach it. And we have Charteris and Sparden have defined two different kinds of approaches, a system-oriented approach versus a students-oriented approach. And this system-oriented approach actually uses students' voice in order to improve their education. And usually what you can find is a mix of both approaches. So system, using actually as an instrument students' voice, and having more an emancipatory approach, students more oriented. And what we find as two major problems of a pitfall we have to be careful when implementing and developing our program is not to instrumentalize a student voice. And this means not falling into kind of tokenism, using students and saying to audits of to the outside world, look, we are doing a lot on students' participation, but not doing it really. And it's also looking at the controversiality of student voice. It asks us to rethink the power relationship within our institution and also the way we look at students' inclusion. And it asks us to really to define from who is actually deciding what's important, who is deciding who is included or not included. So we have used the concept, the kind of the pyramid of a colleague of ours, and we have actually improved it in the way that when you look at student voice of students partnership, it's mainly defined in students as partners in the classroom, students are partners in defining a new pedagogical approach or in the curriculum. But we would like to go a step further and to have really students' participation in our organization. And what we would like to do is to go beyond only having to listening to students, of going beyond partnerships in the way we redesign or think about our programs, but really have taking collective decision within our university. And this does not mean that we fully put the responsibility on students and that we say, okay, students, now you have to participate and it's your responsibility. But what we'd like to do is to have really a shared responsibility, because students, they come and go, but we are staying and we are actually in charge of what's happening in the university. But we would like to have this interaction and participation with our students in an open-minded way, where respect, equality, reciprocity, and shared responsibility is really the core values that we are aiming at. In our research, so this is the kind of results we get from our more literature research and the kind of thinking we have been doing, being inspired by this research and getting in touch with researchers that have been working on these topics and implementing programs. in our empirical research, we have found that actually our university has a lot of work to do. And our students feel welcome, but they not feel heard always. We have kind of non-participation in formal participation councils. And we have a positive appreciation of formal participation. So I have my dog who's not very happy. So sorry for this. Gaia. Okay, I have her attention. So a lot of our students feel welcome, but not yet heard. We have talked to a lot of students who say, well, when we have ideas in order to improve what's happening in the classroom, we have really, it depends on the teacher if we can interact with the teacher. But when we have suggestion on curriculum, then we have really to do our best in order to be heard. So we go to managers, we discuss it with different teachers. And then when we get to have a discussion with them, we never get feedback on what has happened with our proposals. So we have kind of problems here. And I have discussed also with very active students. And when I ask them, what do you do when you have a questions in curriculum improvement? They say, oh, I don't know. I don't know to whom I should go there. And then what we get is sometimes we have teachers asking us to think with them about improving curriculum. And then they invite us and then we share some ideas and then we never hear anything. So we have a kind of, and I know some of these teachers and they are very innovative teachers and very motivated. And I think there is here a kind of not knowing how to do it and how to really have a truly participation and to involve your students, not only in hearing them, but into taking them into the decision process. And this is a dean who said, well, we are also perceiving our students in a very negative way. So students are cheating, we are suspicious about the motivation of our students and things so on. And we have discussed with students also who left our university because of this kind of behavior of the institutions. And this is students from law and safety who said, really, democracy is hearing the voice of the people. I think it's more than hearing the voice, but in our case, the voice of the students and the teachers. So we have really work to do in this. Students that are really active in our students' councils, experience them very positively, but they have really problems reaching fellow students. They feel like they are not really have the resources to participate fully in these councils, taking really important decisions, and they feel really a high time pressure. So we have a lot of documents to read and really little time to reach decision. And this is where deliberative democracy comes in. This has been my topic of research the last 15 years. And what I really like in the new development in democracy, deliberative democracy, is to give back the power to the people, to give back the voice to the people, and to have a more direct way of decision making. So what we would like to do within our university, and we have started some pilots, is to have a more democratic councils in our faculties. This means having really one day in very important decision, one day of deliberation where experts can come and share their perspective on the issue that students and teachers and managers have to take a decision upon, time to deliberate on the issue, think about, look at best practices and make a collective decision. And And in this formal participation, what we would like to use is a recent technology of crowdsourcing, but also of technological platform in order to be able to, for our students to reach out to their fellow students. And this platform, we are working with the University of Amsterdam. They have developed like a crowdsourcing platform where citizens can interact with each other and deliberate in a way that is where they feel comfortable and easy to interact. And what we would like to do is to also have more informal participation. So we would like students and teachers and managers to set up actually the agenda at an institutional level to be able to discuss about very important decisions that are taken budget-wise, but also decisions that will have a direct influence on our education. And this means that sometimes we have to take more time. Everyone is very busy, but we really have to take more time in order and to have high quality discussion, to be really well informed and take the time to take our students serious, respect their viewpoints, and organize ourselves in a way where we have a collective decision making. And we have, yes, and this is the last, okay. Yes. So we would like to set up partnership for collective leadership. In 2 weeks, we will hear about a grant proposal that will help us to set up this partnership. But even if we don't get it, we are going to start. So we have some faculties who will join us, and I'm really enthusiastic to start this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Guérin. We have about 20 some odd minutes left. So I'll forego my questions and we can open up the floor for questions. So if you have any questions, please, indicate who you are addressing them to. And if you can identify yourself, that would be even better. Or as Miranda said, you can add them to the chat. Well, if there aren't any questions, if you need time to, I have a couple questions for Dr. Swanson and Dr. Guérin. Dr. Swanson, I mean, as you mentioned, the concept of citizenship, it's evolving, and since Marshall, and I mean, it's even in terms of national citizenship. It's still something that is evolving, that we know, there's what we can call differentiated citizenship in terms of depending who you are, you'll have certain rights and privileges. But as you get to a global level, it's even more abstract. So, and you said that it's something that's in the curriculum in Scotland. And just out of curiosity, how do young people, how do they define it? In their words, how do they see global citizenship? How do they see themselves? How do they describe themselves as global citizens? That's my question to you. And Dr. Guérin, it's a really interesting presentation of how to think about student participation. I think it's really necessary. I think every university should do this kind of research to think about how to involve their students and what works and what doesn't work. I mean, at my university, students are allowed on different councils, on different levels, where it be program or Senate. And they're consulted, and students have their own coffee shop, bar, their own community gardens. So there is a kind of involvement. They have their own associations. I mean, I've tried to involve in my classwork students in terms more participatory, but it's always very difficult because, as you said, it involves a lot of prep work. That means you have to read a lot. You have to, and a lot of times the students don't do it. And even for instances like Senate, I've been on Senate. There's so much work. It's a lot of work, and students are always, they're one stakeholder. So you have other stakeholders, you have professors, you have part-time professors, you have employees. And so there's all this negotiation going around about, different stakeholders' interests and needs. And I used to be dean. I was dean for a few years. And what I learned is that, I learned who controls the university, and it's accountants and lawyers. And that even as dean, I always used to say maybe I control 20% of my work. So I just want to get your take on that, on these challenges and how these challenges can be addressed, because it seems to me that your research is working through it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Charmain. I think it's a very big question about how students in Scotland, or pupils in Scotland, as they would say here, take up the notion of global citizenship, and it's variously as the answer, depending on who the teacher is and how progressive the school actually is in terms of thinking more critically around global citizenship. For the most part, my experience has been that it's been very instrumental. Global citizenship in schools often tends to be, it can be appropriated any which way. I've even seen a button being put on a little student's collar for picking up papers, and with a big button saying "You're a good global citizen." So it really depends on who the teacher is in schools, that is. And also, I think the different universities here in Scotland do a different job around fostering critical global citizenship and trying to make it more central to their curriculum. At the University of Stirling, we do try to push that quite far, global citizenship and learning for sustainability. So we do try to centralize it in our teacher education program here. The other aspect about it is the way it's written up in the curriculum for excellence, and also the international strategy. Scotland's international development strategy is called global citizenship. So this term gets used variously and often for nationalist interests. Mustafa Gamal and myself have written on this, the distancing strategies and the proximal strategies that get used by various nationalistic orientations to appropriate the term in particular ways, particularly to give distinction from England. So we are more global because we are Scottish, we are proudful because we are Scottish, and we are better global citizens, and we've shown the world. There's a lot of hubris in it, unfortunately, as well. So I think the term has been corrupted, and it requires quite a bit of effort to undo that in engaging in more critical global citizenship with young teachers or students or becoming teachers, and to try and foster a deeper view of democracy, of transformative education, and of global citizenship with students in schools. So it's variously taken up. I have written a paper with Karen Pashby comparing the Alberta orientation to critical global citizenship and the discourses of global citizenship, and compared it with the Scottish version, and that might make for interesting reading on the differences in the way in which it's taken up.
Thank you. Professor Guérin?
Yes, thank you very much for your question. It's funny because I have also discussion with as a researcher, we have discussion with our controller who tell us what we can do and not do, and it's sometimes like crazy. But what I would like to point out is that not all students want to participate, and we should respect this. But what we notice is that there are students who really would like to participate, or raise their voice, but not especially be very active. And we have vulnerable students we would like to reach out. And we think that with this technological platform that we can reach much more students that we could. And we would like really to organize students' assemblies on really important topic. I think it's all the chairs of our university are really behind this idea of setting up these partnerships. So I'm perhaps a little bit optimistic that the controllers won't be the one who tell us what to do and or finance people, but that we will be able to negotiate on what is our power of decision. And because such a decision process is also sometimes kind of negotiation you have to do. So I think perhaps I'm starting this research very optimistic. Perhaps in a few years I will say, well, this is the lessons to learn. But I would like to hold on that it's really possible to have a more democratic way of running our university. And I think it's worth the try to do it. But I feel really uncomfortable when we say all our students leave The Hague University as global citizens, and we are not ourselves an institute that share the democratical values. And in the way we act and we do. So I hope we will, but I know we will have a lot of resistance, and this we are preparing ourselves for this.
Thank you. We have a few questions now in the chat. I'll read some of them. First of all, a question for Dr. Guérin. How were I'll read all of them and then you can answer, and we can start this time with Dr. Guérin. How were professors prepared for deliberation, and are all prepared from that perspective? That's a question from Maria Delia Traverso from Argentina. And Georgina Santa Cruz asks, where I work, or comments, where I work, we are in a kind of academic strike. Despite the effort of our students to fight for improvement, the labor situation of professors, the view is totally adult-centric. What do both of you think about this? And this case is, she's speaking about a case in Mexico. Thank you. And there's also a question from Kathleen Teasley. Kathleen, for Professor Swanson. Kathleen, do you want to ask your question?
Oh, yes, sure. Let's see if I can put on my video here too. Here I am. Hi. Can you see me? Hi, Dalen. I just have a question about the fact that the tension, I perceive a tension between global citizenship perspectives and the perspectives of peoples who are still struggling for their self-determination, you know, and wanting to participate in that quintessential modern project of founding their own nation. And, you know, how can we work through that tension, you know, in creative, critical ways? Thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Guérin, would you like to answer first, and then we'll go to Dr. Swanson?
So actually we have to, on how to deliberate, because deliberation doesn't, research shows, and my own research show also, that we are not always good at deliberating and discussing with each other and taking decisions. So what we are doing with a few colleagues within the university, we are starting like a kind of training in order to experience different kind of discussion, deliberation. So the more kind of agonistic way of letting conflict happen within a discussion and a deliberation, and how do you deal with it? And really a more rational way of deliberation, where emotion plays a less big role. We are also experiencing with a Socratic discussion, kind of discussion. And what we would like to do is, in my work, what was really important is deliberative democracy have a kind of logical way of organizing discussion. And what I would like to do is to, with a professor and teachers and students, to experience different ways of discussion, of going into a discussion in order to ourselves decide on how do we want to do it? And it's the same about the partnership. So we would like to have different best practice, look into what's happening elsewhere, and define with students and managers and teachers what will be our program looking at. So it's kind of like not imposing on our students how the way we would like to implement participation, but preparing, looking from different perspectives at the meta level, and then deciding on how we are going to do it. Yeah, so I have not really a very concrete answer.
Would you like to answer the second question about the adult-centric situation in Mexico concerning professors' unions? The questions in the chat.
Oh, I thought Dalen wanted to answer this first.
But she asked the
okay.
She asked both of you.
Yeah. Okay. When you, Georgina, when you are talking about adult-centric, do you mean, because my problem is our students, when they come, they are also considered, when you look at citizenship, as adults. What do you precisely mean? Is it more that we as staff impose on students our view? Do you mean this? Georgina, you're...
Yes. I opened my microphone. Thank you. I was trying to tell you that here I work at the National University of Mexico, and some part of the schools are on a strike, and the strike comes from the students, and that's because the students want to talk to the management of the university, and they only say kind words to them. They say, oh, it's okay that you care to your professors, but well, we'll hear you sometime. And they don't have really a talk between them. And so they left us in a situation very uncomfortable, because we don't have students in our spaces, for example, in Zoom. We open our session to class and nobody comes. And we know, for example, I know that they are in a right way to say their things and the way they think, because some of them told me, Professor, we are thinking about not your present. We are talking about our future, because sometimes we are thinking, what are we going to do in the future? We would like to do a work as a professor like you. And that's why we're making this movement. But the other authorities, they say, no, it's okay to say that, but it's not okay. So that's why I made the question. Thank you very much.
Yes, so we have discussed this with our board of directors, because it asks, and all the directors, because it asks another kind of leadership. And it's really inclusive leadership, being a role model as board of head of our institution, and actually facilitating students and teachers and team managers to raise their voice, to be heard and taken seriously. So it asks a kind of humility. And I'm really happy because we have changed. One person left the board of director, and the person who replaced, it's someone who's really in tune into this kind of change. So I'm really confident that we will be able to reach this, but it asks for the top of the management of our institution to look in a different way in the way they run the institution, and ask them to have a other kind of leadership. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Swanson?
Okay, so just to answer that, the first question from the perspective of the UK, you know, I think many of the UK universities see students as a threat in that regard. They, you know, try to repel any resistance or solidarity in favor of the staff, but actually we're in quite a difficult situation anyway with regard to increasing conservative policies here across universities and the proletariatizing of our jobs here in the UK. In South Africa, there's a lot more voice that students have, and they carry a lot more weight, and they're by necessity, by demand, heard a lot more. So, you know, it's quite interesting for me to see the difference between that. I've lived in Canada, South Africa, and here in the Middle East, but it's interesting, you know, to see these different perspectives. But it is a case that the student voice at many UK universities are used as an instrument to punish staff. You know, NSS scores and student surveys, student voice is viewed as a means to punish staff if they don't conform to certain things. There was a discussion very recently around decolonizing the curriculum, which is a movement in the Global South is quite advanced compared to here in the UK. And the comment was, we can't use that term. We must use diversifying the curriculum, you know, not decolonizing. So there's still much of that type of thing, which is still viewed very much as dangerous and as a threat. So, you know, it's a different political milieu that we're working in. But just to answer Catherine's question about global citizenship, and I totally agree with her that the term is probably not very useful for certain populations or groups of people that are dealing with issues at a level. And I think for critical global citizenship, the idea of local knowledges and indigeneity may be an aspect of critical global citizenship that has more resonance with, you know, I'm just thinking about the South African context and the day zero droughts, and the fact that Cape Town was going to run out of water day zero at a particular date, day zero. And the disenfranchised, those living in deep informality said, but we've been living with day zero for decades. What do you mean day zero? So there's this discrepancy, there's this big divide between what we think is needed or should be done for disenfranchised populations, and without their having voice and say and their local knowledges and local ontologies being heard, I don't think global citizenship is a very useful term at all in that context. Yeah.
Do I have a moment to add something? I agree with you, Dalen. Do I have a moment?
Very quickly, yeah.
Okay. Yes, I just want to say too that I'm connecting from Spain, and you know, within Spain there's a long memory of people not having the right to speak their languages, you know, Catalonia and the Basque Country, and here in Galicia. And so there's also, I mean, still also the Scots, you know, there's a tendency to demonize all nationalism as if it's this ultra exclusionary, you know, kind of far right nationalism when that's not the case.
Yeah, I think you're quite right. There are elements of the nationalism which, Nicola Sturgeon here says that we're nationalists, but we're coming from the left and not from the right, and that's true. It is so. But however, there's contradictions in that. There are orientations or policies that are very much similar to conservative politics down south, but it's being dressed up in a different way. So, with all these things, there's this contradiction. I mean, for me, I'm more sensitive about nationalism because I grew up under apartheid and I understand what that kind of nationalism rendered. And we're still 25 years on trying to undo the damage, which is going to take decades. But, so there is a sensitivity to that as well. But it's a mixed bag. There's aspects of that which are very important, but when it's dressed up in hubris and it's denying the role that Scots played in empire as well. If it's a critical, reflexive nationalism that engages with these issues, I can see that as being productive and useful. And that's in homage to contradiction is the very reason, the very point that I was trying to make here. But, when it's creating divides and oppositions and an us and a them, then it starts to become problematic and then circles around again. Yeah.
That's a very important point. Yeah. And we'll conclude on that. So I'd like to thank our two speakers, Dr. Swanson and Dr. Guérin. Thank you very much for very stimulating presentations and debates. Thanks to the organizers once again, to the UNESCO chair, to Miranda as well, who helps a lot, and to all those who participated. Thank you very much.